Good afternoon, everyone. Phil Penarski here with CBS 42 now. Hope you're all having a great start to your day. Unfortunately, the Alabama Crimson Tide were unable to pull out the victory in the national championship game last night against the Georgia Bulldogs, but they have finally returned home to Tuscaloosa there at the Malmore Athletic Center. We will send you there live now as the team is getting off the bus. They arrived in Birmingham, the Birmingham Shuttlesworth International Airport earlier today after flying out of Indianapolis, where the game was held last night. They will be arriving and getting set to prepare for next season. As you can imagine, a lot of the star players on this team are underclassmen and will likely be returning. Of course, Bryce Young and Will Anderson, two of the top players and potential Heisman Trophy favorites. Of course, Bryce Young winning the Heisman this year. He could possibly be a favorite to repeat next year alongside Will Anderson Jr. They are only sophomores. They will be expected to play a big role in the Tide's return to the college football playoff next season and their journey towards another national championship. Of course, it was a very exciting game. The final score doesn't really reflect how exciting that game was, how close it was really all throughout. Of course, Georgia putting up 20 points in that fourth quarter. But Alabama had a chance to tie it up and send the game into overtime with about a minute left before an untimely Bryce Young pick six was returned the other way by the Bulldogs, giving Georgia the 33-18 lead and snapping their 41-year title drought. They have not won a national championship since 1980. It had been 41 years since the Georgia Bulldogs won a national championship. So, of course, the team is coming back. Definitely will be expecting them to get back to work immediately in hopes of getting back to the national championship next year. Just want to go over a couple of the stats from some of the key players there. Of course, the big story out of that game was early on, star receiver Jameson Williams suffering that untimely knee injury and missed the rest of the game. So Bryce Young was really limited in his experienced passing options. Of course, John Mechie III had already been injured earlier in the SEC championship game against the Georgia Bulldogs, where Alabama was actually victorious in that one. But Will Richard, the kicker for the Crimson Tide, had a big day. Of course, some things that bring a lot of fear to Crimson Tide fans, of course, is special teams, kicking, place kicking, field goals as well. But Will Richard, he made his first 3 field goals. He ended up going 4 for 5 in the game, so very impressive there. So definitely there were a lot of bright spots for this Crimson Tide team. Again, going 13-2 is nothing to stick your nose up at, and of course, getting back to the college football playoff is definitely a big deal. And of course, you can find everything you need to know regarding the entire season revolving the Crimson Tide, from their SEC championship win, the incredible Iron Bowl game versus the Auburn Tigers, their sole regular season loss to the Texas A&M Aggies, and all the way leading up to the national championship, and as well as looking forward. Our sports team here at CBS 42 has done a great job of really encapsulating the entire season, and of course we will be bringing you all of the latest updates regarding the Crimson Tide, the Auburn Tigers, the UAB Blazers, as far as the college football season is concerned going into this next season and recapping this past season. It can all be found right now over on our website, cbs42.com, and of course we will be broadcasting of all of the latest information on all of our newscasts starting in about 3.5 hours on the CBS 42 News at 4, 5, 6, and 10. And I would like to remind everybody that right here on CBS 42 now at 6 p.m. we will be hearing from Alabama Governor Kay Ivey as she will be giving her State of the State address for this upcoming year, as Governor Ivey looks to maintain and secure another term as governor of Alabama later on this year. Definitely be expecting to see that. And, of course, if you head on over to our website, you can find the State of the City address courtesy of Birmingham Mayor Randall Woodfin. That can be found over on CBS42.com as well as on the CBS 42 News app. I encourage everybody to go ahead and download that app. It is available for free for all Android and iOS devices. That way you can get notified whenever there are special events such as these addresses, as well as the Crimson Tide arriving back here in T-Town. As you can see, there are several players just standing outside the Malmore complex there in Tuscaloosa on the University of Alabama's campus. They're just sort of soaking it all in, getting all the way to the national championship in Indianapolis. Lucas Oil Stadium was the site for the 2021 College Football Playoff National Championship between the number 1 Alabama Crimson Tide and number 3 Georgia Bulldogs. But, of course, those rankings likely be a little bit different in the final AP rankings as well, as the Georgia Bulldogs pulled off the win against the Crimson Tide 33-18 last night. And given as improbable and as incredible Bryce Young had been, of course, the Heisman Trophy winner, he still had a very strong outing given all the circumstances surrounding the Crimson Tide offense, with John Mechie III, his top receiver, being out, as well as Jamison Williams, who was getting a lot of Player of the Year conversations as well. He suffered an injury. Both were placed on the injured list in the 2 Georgia games. Jamison Williams being injured early on in the national championship game, but of course, Bryce Young had a very great game. He went 35 for 57, threw the ball for 57 times in that game, and threw for 369 yards. He did add another touchdown to his very impressive statistical season, but he did have 2 costly interceptions, one of them that was returned for a touchdown for Georgia in the closing minute of the national championship game, and that really put the game away. Of course, you can find the latest on the press conference following the game with multiple players on the Crimson Tide. We heard from Bryce Young, Will Anderson Jr., Coach Saban, of course, Slade Bolden got up there, Henry To'oTo'o, the star linebacker, as well as Christian Harris. They all gave a lot of great sound, a lot of positive feedback if you are a Crimson Tide fan going into next season. Bryce Young, though, really taking the loss on the chin, saying that he wishes that he could have played better in that game and that he really is upset that he let his team down, being very, very emotional in his speech there at the end of the game and his post-game comments. Coach Saban, though, took the podium alongside Bryce Young as well as Will Anderson, and as the players were getting ready to leave the podium, Saban actually stopped them to tell them how important they are to this team and how great of seasons they had. Of course, Will Anderson winning several major awards on the defensive side of the ball. And as I mentioned earlier, the future is very bright for the Crimson Tide. Many of their top players will be returning next season in hopes of not only returning to the college football playoff, but possibly winning yet another national championship for Coach Saban and the Crimson Tide. It appears that most of the players and coaches have arrived at the Malmore Center there in Tuscaloosa on the campus of the University of Alabama. Again, you can find everything you're looking for regarding the national championship as well as the Crimson Tide over on our website, cbs42.com. If you're watching us on Facebook, you can actually click that link in the description box. It will direct you directly to our website where you can find everything you need to know over on there. And as I mentioned, we will be continuing to cover the state addresses here on CBS 42 as Governor Ivey will be giving her State of the State address happening at 6 p.m. right here on CBS 42 now, so be sure to tune in for that. And Mayor Woodfin is currently actually giving his State of the City address. We will be bringing that to you shortly here on CBS 42 now as well. But for this latest edition of CBS 42 Now, I'm Phil Penarski, and we want to thank you all so much for tuning in as the Crimson Tide are once again back in Tuscaloosa.